I'm sure you guys have noticed I've been growing out the beard, trying to fit in with the colony. I'm prepared to gut every single last one of them if they try to make their way near me.
I have something to show you, Karen.
Hey! Welcome back, horror fans. Bobo here with BrassReel Brothers. Thanks for joining me for some more hot, fresh popcorn. Kicking off the final week of a BrassReel Halloween! For this Monster Monday, we're kicking it off with my favorite werewolf movie of all time. The 1981 classic, The Howling.
The Howling.
Directed by Joe Dante and starring Dee Wallace and Dennis Dugan. There's a few other stars in it too, but those are the two main characters they focus on. And there's a guy in it by the name of Slim Pickens. No kidding, that's his real name. It's my life's dream to meet that guy. So this is my favorite werewolf movie. It came out in 1981. In fact, it came out the month I was born, March 1981. There you go, I revealed my age. Man, there's just something about this movie that I love. It stands out from all of the werewolf movies in my opinion. This movie kind of proved that you could do werewolf movies without making it the sort of old school gothic universal monster style of werewolf, like the way Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy were. I personally feel like Joe Dante showed people what was up with werewolves. This one and American Werewolf in London. American Werewolf in London was a little bit more of a lighthearted approach, whereas The Howling was actually pretty intellectual, it was thought-provoking, and it just had this gritty feel to it that I loved. American Werewolf did come out in August of that same year. This one came out in March, but they were working on them at the same time, I'm sure. And John Landis and Joe Dante, not only were they horror directors that were famous at the time, but they were friends too. Joe Dante went on to direct some of the two most celebrated classics of all time, Gremlins and Gremlins 2, The New Batch, which both of those movies I love. They're completely different, but I love them both. If you've never seen this movie and you've seen the first Gremlins film, you can see some of the similarities. But like I said, a lot of people toss this one and American Werewolf in London in a versus battle, which one's the best werewolf film, or which one has the best transformation, because they both have some really awesome visual effects transformations you get to see, you know, before there was any CGI, and they both look awesome, and they're totally different from each other. The guy that did the special effects in this one is Rob Bottin, the same guy who did the effects in the Thing movie by John Carpenter. That guy really dedicates some time to his effects. Where you have Savini, who is more of like the slasher king, where he was great at creating like awesome kills. Rob Bottin created more of the creature stuff, the monsters. Not saying that Savini didn't do any of that, but he specialized more in the awesome kills. Bottin specialized more in the creature effects. It's an interesting story how this movie got off the ground. A man by the name of Stephen A. Lang, who was a movie theater owner, read this novel, loved the novel, and thought to himself, hey, I own a theater, this would be a good movie. Somehow or another along the way, you can watch the documentary on the DVD or the Blu-ray. I only have the DVD of this one because when I went and got the Blu-ray, it was like 30 bucks. And I was like, this is the same exact special edition. And it's an old enough movie where the difference between Blu-ray and DVD really isn't significant. But it does look great, and the special features are fantastic on it. You got an awesome making of. You get to see how this whole thing was lifted off the ground from square one. Yeah, but that guy, Stephen A. Lang, him and another guy, Jack Conrad, who was supposed to direct the movie originally, then they realized quickly the tone that they were envisioning wasn't what they were getting. So they quickly shifted gears to Joe Dante, and he brought it. From the beginning, you see the approach this movie's going for. Real serious tone, set in a pretty clear reality to where you believe it. Fright Night is my favorite vampire movie, but that one's very fairy tale fiction feeling. It's a lot of fun. It's very 80s pop culture. Even though this one was 1981, you're not constantly focusing on what year it was made while you're watching it. You actually can forget about that pretty quickly. As far as the feel and tone of the movie, it's not trying to play off anything that was hot or pop culture at the time or trendy at the time. It's just telling you a really cool werewolf story. But the movie starts out with this sort of like sting operation they're trying to set out. Dee Wallace plays this famous news anchor. It shows her making her way to a phone booth. She's talking to a guy and he's saying he has something for her. He wants to show her something. And she ends up going to this like personal porn theater where they're actually showing a snuff film. And he's just telling her to keep watch, keep watch. And he's just saying all this real sadistic stuff. But he keeps saying he wants to show her something. and then she sees something, and the way it's filmed with these lights, and you see sort of the silhouette of the werewolf coming forward, but you don't really see it. You just have this silhouette vision of it with this light behind it, and the whole time, from that moment on, she's completely terrified. She's having flashbacks, dreams. She can't get it off of her mind. But the way they set that element of the werewolf right in the beginning, but then they don't show you anything, and they don't show anything for a minute after that. But it creates this sort of fantasy that you build up in your mind, and to me, the imagination of something and what you sort of create in your head ultimately becomes scarier than what they just show you immediately. Her husband is played by this Tom Atkins' younger brother lookalike or something. I swear he could be like Tom Atkins' younger brother. He ain't never gonna be as cool as Tom Atkins though. And he's waiting with everybody while the sting is going on at the news station, along with Dennis Dugan's character, who is kind of like the station manager. And they're waiting for all this thing to happen, and finally she starts basically getting attacked by this guy / werewolf. She doesn't know what it is. Since they've got her on a wire, they can hear that she's being attacked, and the cops come in there and they just end up shooting the guy, but they don't realize he's a werewolf because as soon as they shoot him and he becomes dead, he's just back to human form. Like I said, the whole movie at this point is her just trying to get this stuff off of her mind, and she goes to this therapist that tells her to go to this vacation retreat area called the Colony. As soon as she gets there, it's just like very like country folk / hippie folk commune area. It's in the woods / on the beach. For me, what works about this movie is the acting and the serious tone that it takes. All the acting is really good. None of it's trying to be cheesy. None of it's just, you know how sometimes when you're watching certain movies and you see it and it's just like, oh my God. This isn't like that. All the dialogue is good. It works. It's believable. And you could say that it follows some like horror movie tropes and all that stuff. But like I said, Joe Dante at this point was the first dude to have released a werewolf movie that felt like this, that wasn't based on that gothic tone, that old school castle werewolf, you know, lynch mob from the city type deal. This was more like a cabin in the woods slasher vibe feel to it. You can't really say that it's following any of the tropes when it actually was one of the movies that was a part of that group that sort of set the tropes and set the rules. First night she's there, she wakes up and she's hearing howling at the night. And meanwhile, she's always having these flashbacks and visions of that night that happened with her and the werewolf in the porn theater. But man, the setting of this movie is great. The way the howling works when you're looking at all the like creepy, foggy woods, the lighting is awesome, the cinematography is awesome. It all just really holds up in my opinion. And it ain't just because it came out the month I was born. Or maybe there is a connection to that. Maybe I am a werewolf. But with the way it's being shot and filmed, it quickly develops into this cabin in the woods, camp slasher feel, like I was saying. And man, Joe Dante's really good at like building the pressure and holding back until the movie pops, because that's what this movie does, like a lot of movies do. It's building up the pressure, and then it pops, and then it just keeps going, and it doesn't stop until it's over. And if you think that's kind of how Gremlins was, don't feed them after midnight, don't get them wet, and then once it pops, all hell breaks loose. But you got Dennis Dugan, who was like the news station manager. Somehow or another, him and his wife start digging and they put together this werewolf folklore thing. Partially because they go visit Dick Miller at this like library and he starts kind of ensuing upon exposition, and they occasionally watch some stuff on TV, but he figures it out slowly but surely, but they haven't done anything about it. They're just kind of coming up with suspicions on their own. Meanwhile, the Tom Atkins younger brother lookalike is being tempted by this hot girl that exists at the colony that, you know, the camera's focusing on her and you're thinking that something's probably up with her. I mean, I am seeing a movie called The Howling, but she tries to lay it on him a little bit. He refuses, and then after that, on his way back to the cabin, gets bitten by a werewolf. And then he wakes up the next night after he's just carnivorous and eating all the time and feeling great, is drawn to these howls in the middle of the woods, and he finally meets up with that hot girl and he realizes she's a werewolf, and now he's a werewolf, and they're doing it, werewolf sex. And there is this cheesy little scene where you see them like kind of cartoonishly both evolve from humans into werewolves, and then the camera goes up to the moon. For some reason it really works, even as cheesy as it looks. I still love it. So long story short, the couple drives up there, he drops the wife off, she decides to hang out and chill out with him. She ends up going and snooping around in this other cabin in the woods and ends up getting attacked by the werewolf in broad daylight, ultimately to go back to the office of this whole vacation retreat to finally get killed by a werewolf there. And we get to see a full-on transformation, and it's a guy from the beginning, and the transformation is awesome. I love this one. I don't prefer it over American Werewolf in London. There's something about it that I just like a little differently. You just have to see them both to see what I'm talking about. But it's where we get our first real look of it, and like I said, our first real kill. And that's when Dee Wallace gets stopped by a lot of the people at this colony, taken to this barn, only to find out that this is a colony of werewolves. And her doctor who recommended going there, he's a werewolf too, but he's trying to do the right thing and make them evolve for the future and be like civil werewolves and only feed off cows and stuff. But most of the other ones, their true nature, they want to eat humans. That's where all the real fun action hits. You get to see everybody start behaving. And they do this thing where they kind of make them look like vampires with these crazy eyes first, and then their heads start bubbling, and then ultimately turn into werewolves. Look, this was a low budget movie. They didn't have a ton of money to do things with. So for the money they did have, it definitely looks top notch. In fact, you would have told me this was low budget. I would have just thought it was a movie that came out in the 80s. I wouldn't have thought it was low budget, but it was. They had next to nothing. But since Dennis Dugan's character, he dropped his wife all up there, went back home, but he got the call from her while she was dying, basically, and he did his homework on werewolves, he realizes that silver bullets can kill him. And that's another thing in this. It's not by the full moon, it's not by any of that. They can shapeshift and turn whenever they want to. But silver bullets are what kills them. Regular bullets don't. He figures it out, goes up there, saves the day by shooting a bunch of them, including Slim Pickens. They end up locking all the werewolves in this barn and set it on fire. You're thinking it might work, but nah, they're werewolves. They bust through, but luckily they're able to escape. But before they can escape, a werewolf jumps in the car and bites D. Wallace in the shoulder. Oh. After all that, she's almost away and she gets bit on the shoulder. So as she's pulling away, she's saying to Dennis Dugan, we got to tell the world about this. They have to know. All the wolves stay there in their little den, whatever you want to call it. So she goes back. Remember, she's a news anchor. She does a live TV appearance, and she ends up going on live TV and turning into a werewolf right there. And Dennis Dugan shoots her in front of everybody. And everybody sees it. This movie was trying to say something. I'm not really sure what it was trying to say, but it did have a message behind it, whether it be like, be careful the company you keep because you can turn into them, or if it was addressing like exposing secret societies. I don't really know what it was trying to say, but I do feel like it was trying to say something. The fun little stinger we get at the end though is when they're showing these guys watching the news and they're like, yep, she just turned into a werewolf. The camera pans over to one dude and you hear a waiter ask him what he wants to eat. And he's like, I'll have a steak so-and-so and a burger. How do you want that cooked? And they pan over one.
Rare.
A crazy little scene to where we're seeing the credits go up while we're watching a burger get cooked on a flat top. Really weird, but for some reason you can't look away from it while you're watching it. I guarantee you, go watch this movie. When the credits go up, you'll watch that entire credit scene. They went on to do some sequels after this, but the rights immediately got sold away from the original guys, except for that Stephen A. Lang theater owner guy. He's the one that kept running with it to try to make sequel after sequel. The second one, Howling 2, My Sister's a Werewolf, that one was fun to watch, but it's not a good movie, and then they got significantly worse after that, especially the Marsupials, Part 3. Oh, God. So The Howling? Oh yeah, Wolfman's got popcorn. Well guys, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode and another installment for a BrassReel Halloween! Make sure you tune in for tomorrow's episode of Timid Tuesdays, where we're gonna have Monster Squad. Yeah, that's right, Wolfman's got nards. Look for BrassReel Brothers on Facebook. Look for Bobby Williams on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, BrassReel Bobby at BrassReel. And help us get to 200 subscribers by the end of the month by hitting that like and subscribe button. And remember, if life gives you lemons, make some hot, fresh popcorn with a wolf. Yeah, that's right, that was real.